Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we're on the website of Brompton's auctioneers based in the UK, and we're going to have a look at their latest auction, which is mainly bowed stringed instruments, but there are also a few guitars and other bits in there. I think we have about 270 lots or so in this auction, so a fair amount, but not too crazy. If I can, I'll put some chapters in the comments section so you can kind of go to the different parts pretty quickly, but I'm not sure how easy that will be. This particular auction is finishing on the 30th of October. It is the 22nd today, so a good 8 days or so left to go. Buyer's premium is 20% on this auction, but if you are the first to bid and then you end up winning, you get 2% off that, so it becomes 18% instead, which can be quite useful. This is a UK based auction, so bear in mind import and export fees, shipping, any CITES restrictions, etc., all of that stuff. Check all the terms as always. There'll be a link to this video in the description. This should be a really good auction because this is one of the top auction companies for bowed stringed instruments, and this is one of the top kind of sales of the winter, so it should be pretty good. Just to say, if you do enjoy these videos, please consider liking, subscribing or commenting, because it really does help. We're going to try and get through it as quickly as possible, but it might take a while. There are a lot of interesting things. I'll do my best. We'll see how it goes, and yeah, let's see what we have. So straight in, we've got a French nickel-mounted violin bow by Pierre Simon, Paris, 1860, 10 to 15,000 there. So you've got some condition here. Reports stick and frog very good, handle with repaired crack. It's got a Raffin certificate as well, and you can see all the bits kind of here, and that's good to see for a French bow, a Raffin certificate. So always try and inspect things in person if you can, but good to see. That's a good opening lot. Another French silver mounted violin bow by Victor Fatigue, 4 to 6. So we're not going to get in too crazy deep into this. We may just zoom out a tiny bit just so we can get everything in one page without having to keep scrolling down. An English silver mounted violin bow by James Tubbs, 3 to 5. Good English bow. Silver mounted violin bow there, 600 to 1,000. Another French bow there, Nicolas Maire, 20 to 30,000 there. Paris circa 1860. It's got a Raffin certificate there, weight 57, very good throughout aside from minor wear to the frog. And there you can also see that Raffin certificate there. So that's a very nice bow. It's already got a bid actually, so someone's bidding 20,000 on that, so that's interesting. English silver mounted violin bow by Leslie Bailey for W.E. Hills and Sons, 3 to 5. Everyone knows Hill bows are pretty reliable, so good to see them. Another James Tubbs bow here, one of the best English makers, 3 to 5. Albert Nürnberger bow there, gold mounted, great bows, really good value for money really, these German bows, 2 to 3. Albert Nürnberger, really good name. Another French bow there, Andre Vigneron, 12 to 18,000. We're in the kind of high level of bows again. Sold with an appraisal from Christophe Landon and a certificate, so a whole load of documents there that you can have a look at, but we won't get into that now. Another W.E. Hill bow by Albert Leeson, 2.5 to 3,500. They really did churn out quite a lot of bows, I have to say. So a French silver mounted violin bow by Victor Fatigue, 3.5 to 5. Another one with a Raffin certificate there. French silver mounted violin bow by Louis Thomasin, 3 to 5. Let's have a look at the condition. Stick good, general wear throughout, frog good, but with amateur engraving in ebony on audience side and crack to thumb projection. That's interesting. So amateur engraving, that's curious. Another Hill bow there, 3 to 4. Good to see these little condition reports thing. Case wear to crown of head, frog good, but with cheval, handle with minor wear. Okay. Another French bow, Louis Bazin, 2 to 4. Another Albert Nürnberger there, 2 to 3. Emile Francois Houchard bow there with a Raffin certificate. Stick good, but in need of serious straightening. Okay, so it needs a bit of attention there from a chetier, a bow maker. French bow there, School of Maire. It's good to see these little kind of condition summaries. I'm sure you can get a full condition report as well if you really wanted one, but it is good that they do give you these little bits of information. Okay, let's carry on. French bow, Claude Thomas here, 4-6. English silver mounted violin bow, possibly Thomas types. Kind of interesting aesthetics on that bow. The frog probably later. Okay. French silver mounted violin bow by Emile Francois Houchard there, 2.5 to 3.5. French nickel and ivory mounted bow by Charles Nicolas Bazin, 2 to 3. Another French bow there, Marcel Fatigue, 3 to 5. English silver mounted violin bow by Arthur Barnes for W.E. Hills and Sons, 2.5 to 4. German bow there, Richard Weichold. Another French bow by Francois Javier Bazin, 4 to 6. French silver mounted violin bow by Auguste Husson. Another French bow by Brullier and Lot, 2 to 3. Another French bow by Joseph Gaud. I think we can see how this auction is going. Just a generic French bow there. Silver mounted French bow by Cresset and Francais. A fine French silver mounted violin bow by Pierre Simon, Paris, circa 1855. Right, 30 to 40 on that. That's quite an interesting one there. Sold with certificate of Bain & Fucci, Chicago, 1980. Okay, interesting. Very good throughout. It does look in very good condition, actually. Yeah, very clean looking bow. And there's the certificate. Yeah, very curious. Considering its age, really good condition. So that's an interesting one. Right, we're on to instruments now. A fine English violin, probably by Charles Frank Langenay, London, 1930s. Okay, 5 to 7 on that. Let's have a look at a few pictures. Let's see, maybe we'll zoom out a tiny bit more, because otherwise we'll be constantly adjusting, unfortunately. A violin, School of Homolka, Prague, circa 1870. 3 to 5 on that. A German violin by Erich Bruckner, Leuben Steinkirchen, 1923, 2 to 3, quite nice back on that. 357. There's definitely some high tier items in this auction. An Italian violin, Workshop of Biziac, Milan, circa 1910, 15 to 20,000 the estimate. Labelled Antionazzi Romeo, sold with a certificate of Carlson and Newman, Cremona, 1992. 354. So that's good. Interesting looking violin. A violin Mittenwald, circa 1765, 6 to 8,000. Dendro report there from Peter Ratcliffe, 1748 and 1759. Labelled Michael Platner. An Italian violin by Stefano Cornia, Cremona, 2023. We always see some of these modern violins in the sale. 5 to 8. The Ex Cologne, a fine Italian violin by Carlo Tononi, Venice, 1733. 70 to 90,000 on that. So violin is in an excellent state of preservation. Okay, interesting footnotes. Later Italian table attributed to Johannes Danieli, the scroll by Sanctus Seraphin. Okay, interesting. And there's a lot of bump there that we won't go into, so that's kind of interesting here. I guess it has a certain prestige that they're not mentioning that this is kind of a composite instrument, I suppose, which explains the price. Still interesting looking violin, but shows that you do have to read into these things and make sure you know what you're looking at. An Italian violin by Ludovico Blasic, Trieste, 1892. 15 to 20,000 on that. 360 length. The back's fairly long. English violin by Henry Lockie Hill, London, circa 1830. After Amati, 10 to 15,000. I think they're quite nice. I do like the Lockie Hill stuff. Looks like it's had a few repairs in its time. 350. It's quite small back. An Italian violin by Raffaello Bozzi, Milan, circa 1940. Length of back 353. Property of a Lady, a fine Dutch violin, Circle of Peter Rombots, Amsterdam, circa 1720, 30 to 50,000 on that. Length of back 362, that's quite long. That's quite curious, isn't it? Interesting that it is so long. Let's see what else we got here. Italian Violin by Enrico Marchetti, Turin, 1890, 25 to 35,000 on that. Length of back 361. Let's have a look. Similar example can be seen in Lutteria Italiana, Piedmont by Eric Blott. Okay. Violin, probably workshop of Vincenzo Diaria, Naples, 1955. 4 to 6, 352, not super exciting. Violin, possibly Italian, circa 1900, 3 to 5. So a good vague violin there. Really nice back though. Really cool. This is my kind of back that I would look for on a violin. So yeah, it's not too bad if it plays okay. 356, 3 to 5. Be interesting to see the condition report says repairs to table. I think it's interesting enough violin. I don't mind that at all. You can see there's been some repairs in the corner, so that's curious. Quite like that. Property of a gentleman, a fine Italian violin, Circle of Lorenzo Storioni, Cremona, circa 1800, 80 to 100,000 there. Dendro report 1786, 1787, and labelled the 18th century Italian scroll by another hand. Fingerboard has the Hills number. Got a certificate from Hills as well, 354 length of back. Oh, the violin was on loan to the Royal Academy of Music for many years. Okay, interesting. That's curious. Interesting looking violin. $80 to 100,000 on that. Yeah, curious. So Hill said it was Cerruti. That's interesting. Right, property of the late Guido Lamel, an Italian violin by Michele Dicanet, Venice, circa 1765, 50 to 70,000 on that. That's a cool back on that one as well. Very nice. Yeah, nice looking instrument. We won't get into it too deep. 354, sold with a letter from David Hill. Some footnotes and other bits there. Interesting looking violin. An Italian violin by Guido Degani, Venice, 1904, 18 to 22,000 there. Violin retains its original neck and fingerboard. Okay, well, you would probably hope so, since it's only from 1904, but interesting. An Italian violin by Plinio Michetti, Turin, 1962, 14 to 18,000 there on that. Let's see what else we got there. Violin by Paul Bay, probably London, 1890, 5 to 8 on that. Violin possibly Naples, circa 1900, 4 to 6. Interesting. Back on that, 356, unlabelled. What's it? Sold by Martin Restel. Violin of Italian make. Interesting. French violin by Nicolas Morlot, Miracle, 1830. Oh wow, okay, it's one of these ones with the fancy kind of paintings on the back that you sometimes see on some of these French things, usually showing some kind of Napoleonic scene. Wow, 366 length of back. That is a crazily long back. That's going to be pretty uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people. An Italian violin by Carlo Giuseppe Ordone, Turin, 1915. So 50 to 80,000. It's quite high for modern Italian, but looks very well made. Nice back there. Certificate of Eric Blott, 356. Violin is in a fine state of preservation. Italian violin by Avasio Emilio Guerra, Turin, 1954, 25 to 35,000. Be interesting to see how a lot of these sell or not, because some of the prices seem a little bit high. Italian violin by Guido Degani, Venice, 1889, 18 to 25,000 on that. Italian violin by Enrico Marchetti, Turin, 1921. We're seeing a lot of the same names being repeated in this auction, 30 to 40,000. An Italian violin by Luigi Lanaro, Padua, 1996, 9 to 11,000 there. An English violin by Robert Thompson, London, circa 1750, 4 to 6,000 there. Very interesting, 353, good English maker there. An interesting violin, possibly Italian, second half of the 19th century, 7 to 10, 358 length of back. It's kind of a curious looking violin. Let's see what else we have. An Italian violin by Antonio Gragnani, Livorno, 1784, 40 to 60 on that. Great scroll, really nice. A certificate of Peter Biddulph there from 2014, 356 length of back. An Italian violin by Evasio Emilio Guerra, Turin, 1928. Once again, we're seeing same things over and over again. I mean, this auction is just full of Italian and French bows, or alleged Italian instruments. An Italian violin by Stefano Caponetto, Catania, 1931, 2 to 3 on that. Length of back, 357. An Italian violin by Celeste Ferrotti, Milan, 1912, after Pietro Antonio Landolfi, 30 to 40,000 on that. 358. Quite like this. Nice scroll on that. It's got some good charm to it, which I like. Yeah, nice back on that. So this is quite a nice instrument in my opinion. So that's good. French violin by Emile Germain, Paris, 1900. 12 to 16 on that. Italian violin by Luigi Lanaro, Padua, 1981. A really nice back on that. As you can probably tell, I do like the nice backs. French violin by Paul Bailly, Paris, circa 1900. 7 to 10 on that. Repairs to table and back, soundpost crack in table. So that obviously affects things. You can kind of see the line where that is. Also a bit of a crack repair there. Lots of heavy crackle on the varnish as well, which is a bit unfortunate. English violin by John Ferber, London, 1813, 3.5 to 5,000 on that. Length back, 354. I quite like these Ferber instruments. They've got interesting kind of purfling, but they're not super valuable nor necessarily that amazing, but I think they're an interesting part of kind of English violin making. An Italian violin by Stefano Scarampella, Mantua, circa 1890, 50 to 80,000 there. Certificate of Dimitri Gindin, one of the experts on more modern Italian violins there. Yeah, it looks like a nice enough instrument. You can see videos of them being played as well. Bromptons are pretty good with that. An Italian violin by Giorgio Gatti, Turin, 1923. We're flooded with Italian violins there. I think it's going to continue. An Italian violin by Giovanni Foscini, Bagnacavallo, 1982. Probably pronouncing that really badly. But yeah, interesting violin. Sold with certificate of Giovanni Antioni. Let's see what else we've got. French violin attributed to Paul L'Orange, Marseille, 1934. 3 to 5 on that. An interesting violin after Carlo Bergonzi, 8 to 12. That's curious. 352 length of back. This is unfortunate kind of cheek patch there, so it would need a bit of restoration, but interesting enough. French violin by Auguste Sebastian Philippe Bernardel, Paris, 1842, 16 to 20,000 there. With a Rampal certificate there. Interesting, 349 length of back. That is quite small. Really nice wood though. Very interesting. So we're still far off the end of this auction. A Italian violin by Rodolfo Freddi, Rome 1943. I think I'm getting a bit brain dead from all these instruments. Looks fairly standard, 15 to 20,000. Some of these modern Italian instruments I'm not so up on. A violin attributed to Mihaly Remini, Budapest, 1912, 5 to 8,000 on this. It's got a certificate of Tibor Semmelweis, Budapest, 2023, 357, length of back there, 5 to 8. An Italian violin by Carmine di Aguano, Naples, 1985, 3 to 5 on that. Okay, some of these modern Italian things not so exciting, but you can get them fairly reasonable money. A German violin by Heinrich Theodor Heberlein, Marknekerken, circa 1890, 2 to 3 on that. 357 doesn't look too exciting. Here's some books. Modern Italian Makers by Dimitri Gindin, 500 to 800. I think Ingalls and Hayday had one of these for a similar kind of estimate, maybe a bit higher. Italian violin by Igino Sedersi, Florence, 1981, 9 to 12,000 on that. Length back 357. This violin is possibly one of the last violins the maker made. Sedersi would have been aged 97 when this violin was completed. The current owner inherited the violin from the Sedersi family. Okay, interesting. An Italian violin by Michele Platner, Rome, circa 1720 to 50, 60 to 80,000 there. It's got a Peter Bidoff certificate there from 2016. Peter Bidoff being one of the world's experts on Italian violins, especially the violins of Del Gesù. So that's interesting. An Italian violin attributed to and probably by Giacomo Zanoli, Verona, 1730, 18 to 25,000. Interesting kind of F-holes on that. I quite like it in a way. It's kind of interesting scroll, curious looking thing. Certificate from Hill & Sons. They say that it's by Zanoli, with exception of the scroll, which they say is made by Testore, which is actually interesting. 356 length of back. Violin attributed to Matthias Hoffmann, Amsterdam, circa 1730, 15 to 20,000. One of my favourite Dutch makers, actually, Hoffmann. Really cool violin. I would like to own a Hoffmann at some point if I could. I think it's a bit out of the realm of possibility at the moment, but nice looking violin. 356. The Dutch violins I think are really underrated. Some really great older Dutch violins out there. English violin by John Betts, London, circa 1800, 10 to 15,000. Length back 355. That's again like a nice English violin here, 355 the length of back. Yeah, I think that's just a fairly decent instrument. They got a long blurb here from John Dilworth about John Betts and Betts family, etc. Important English maker. Italian violin school of Marchetti, Turin, circa 1920. 8 to 12,000. A French violin, second half of the 18th century. 5 to 8. It's an interesting looking violin. 350 length of back. Repairs to table, ribs, and back. For some reason the zoom is not working. It definitely looks like it's seen better days, but interesting looking. Property of the late Gerald Milton Bessler, an Italian violin by Annibale Fagnola, Turin, 1910. 80 to 100,000 on this. Certificate of Dimitri Gindin there, 2023. So lots of choice of Italian violins. Right, on to some Viola Bows now. Sartre, the man of the moment, 18 to 25,000 on that. Raffin certificate. English Viola Bow there, probably by Edward Tubbs. English silver and ivory mounted viola bow by Percy Bryant. French viola bow there, that's an interesting looking one. Another French bow, workshop of Picat, 3 to 5. English silver-mounted viola bow by Percy Bryant. French bow by Charles Nicolas Bazin. French silver-mounted viola bow by Jean-Claude Houchard. Interesting. 325 on that. Pierre Guillaume certificate. Another French bow by Bazin there. Silver-mounted viola bow, probably workshop of Finkel. Right, the X Watson Forbes, an English gold and tortoiseshell mounted viola bow by Albert Leeson for W.E. Hills and Sons 8 to 12. It's already got bids of 7,000 there. Okay. An English silver and tortoiseshell mounted viola bow by W.E. Hills and Sons 6 to 8. French silver mounted viola bow by Louis Henri Guillet 4 to 6. English silver mounted viola bow by James Tubbs. Nice looking bow, looks like it needs a little bit of attention there. Stick good though, in need of straightening. Handle with significant wear, frog with much wear, cracks and repairs. Mounts not original to stick. So bit of work there. Interesting looking bow though. Right, Violas, a fine Italian viola by Giuseppe Ornati, Milan 1952, 80 to 100,000. Wow, you can really see how the modern kind of instruments are going up in value. That is a beautiful scroll from the front, I have to say. That's really nice. That's a nice looking instrument. Someone really took care on that. Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful work on that instrument. That's definitely really nice. Labelled Ornati, length of back 43, really good modern size. This viola features in Giuseppe Ornati by Giorgio Grisales. Interesting. Yeah, really nice looking violin that. Italian viola by Gaetano Scarabotto, Parma, 1931, 40 to 50,000 there. Sold a certificate of the maker. Getting into fancy territory now. Length of back 404, which is not too bad. An Italian viola, probably by L. Pasqualotti, Trieste, circa 1890 to 1900, 16 to 20,000, 397. It's fairly small. Looks a little bit interesting work there, but definitely a curious instrument. Yeah, it's a very Pasqualotti is unrecorded as a maker, but looking at this viola, there seems to be a similarity between his work and that of Giuseppe de Lenz. Okay, curious. A German viola by Martin Leopold Vidal, Nuremberg, 1799, 5 to 8,000. Very good, branded internally LW, which is one of the things you want to see when looking for a Vidal. Nice looking instrument actually, and good to see something that's not Italian, because it's getting a bit Italian heavy, this auction. I think that's their plan, Bromptons. They just want Italian instruments and French bows. Italian viola by Guglielmo Rossi, Pavia, circa 1920, 15 to 20,000. Absolutely destroyed that name there. 411. The length of back, which is not bad. A rare English viola by John Norburn, London, circa 1750, 10 to 15,000. Interesting. Length of back 418. Wow, okay. That's curious. Wow, that is a cool scroll. Look at that. That's an interesting looking scroll. Not a maker I've ever heard of, to be honest, but quite curious for an English viola that it's that size. That is really quite unusual. Like a nice kind of good size for a modern player. So this is an interesting one. This would be something on my radar if I had the funds. Interesting viola, that one. Italian viola by Filippo Brandiglione, Brescia, 1793, 5 to 8, 382. Really small, but very interesting looking viola. Once again, nice looking instrument. Wow, what a beautiful back on that. That's really beautiful. Very interesting. Yeah, that's a nice looking one. They've got some really good instruments in this. A viola, 3 to 5,000 the estimate. Not a lot on it. 394. Kind of curious. Very wide, isn't it? Cool, curious back on that. Quite like that. Interesting viola, that, whatever it is. Right, another viola here. English viola by Philip Walters, Gloucestershire, 1989. 1,500 to 2,000 on that. So you might hear some fireworks or something in the back of this video. I'm not sure what's going on, but someone's having lots of fireworks. A fine Italian viola by Vincenzo Sannino, Naples, circa 1900, 40 to 60,000 on that. Really cool scroll, really interesting looking instrument. Really nice varnish and back to it. Certificate from Dmitry Gindin, and also an earlier certificate from Moaning and Sons. It's 429. It's getting on the fairly large size there. Italian Viola by Piero Paravicini, Milan, 1940, 18 to 25,000. Well, this is really just non-stop Italian stuff, isn't it, basically? 430, another one that's quite fairly big. Eric Blott certificate there. The X Hill, a fine English viola by Arthur and John Betts, London, circa 1840. I swear that all of these auctions are just kind of competing with each other. We see, like, I think an Arthur Betts violin in the Ingalls and Hayday auction, and now we see an Arthur and John Betts viola, which I just don't recall seeing many instruments by them at auction. So that's strange. 378 though is pretty small. I think there's a mistake here. John Dilworth, right? Oh no, it is. Oh, sorry, English viola by Arthur and John Betts. I'm getting confused now on names. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Well, a bit of a John Dilworth thing as well. Yeah, that's interesting. 15 to 20,000 on that. I'm getting a bit confused. I've seen too many instruments, I think, today. Lot 117, property of a retired musician, a fine Italian viola by Marino Capiccioni, Rimini, 1950. We're seeing loads of instruments by this maker come up for auction recently, across all the auction houses. 50 to 70 on this. 47, that's fairly good length, bordering on a little bit on the big side. Yeah, very strange. An Italian viola by Valentino de Zorzi, Florence, circa 1900. Interesting. 8 to 12. Wow, length of back 479. That is really quite mad. I don't know how anyone's really going to play that, but interesting. Certificate Florian Leonhard there. Scottish viola, possibly by David Stirrat, Edinburgh, circa 1815, 5 to 8, 420. Another good size there for an older instrument. Yeah, curious. David Stirrat, that's a good Scottish maker. Sold with a letter from Max Moller attributing the viola to Calcaneus. Just shows you that all of these weird attributions over the years. Pretty strange. An Italian viola by Giulio Degani, Venice, 1906, 15 to 20,000 on that. Viola is in a very fine state of preservation. 380, that's fairly small. Wow, loads of violas. I say, if you're a violist, you're having a good time, I think, in this auction. Lot 121, an English viola by John Betts, London, early 19th century, 10 to 15,000. 374, it's very small. A German viola by Wilhelm August Kessler, Mannheim, circa 1895, 4 to 6, 44 length of back. Interesting instrument, quite long F-holes. Finally, we see something that's not actually Italian, which is a bit of a rarity in this auction. English viola by George Stoppani, Manchester, 1988. Once again, we're seeing Stoppani instruments in all the auctions as well, so very weird. 4 and 12, quite a good size of back. Lot 124, a property of the late Gerald Milton Bessler, a rare Italian viola by Marco Antonio Serin, Venice, circa 1800, 70 to 100,000. Great scroll on that. Really interesting looking instrument, that. Beautiful kind of back, and looks like it's had a bit of a retouch. Labelled Goffrilla there. Length of back 390. Dendra report 1791, 1787. Recently discovered viola is in a very fine state of preservation and liberally covered in beautiful golden red varnish. Okay. Right, we're on to bows here. Cello bow by Nikolai Kittel, St. Petersburg, circa 1850. Very rare to see Nikolai Kittel bow, actually 15 to 20,000. Really interesting, very good throughout, handle with some wear. The mounts in the style of Kittel, though possibly from a later date. Interesting. Kind of surprised at the value of this estimate. I thought that the Kittel bows went for a lot higher. French cello bow there by Andre Vigneron, 8 to 12. French cello bow by Vora. French silver mounted cello bow by H. Fleury. A French bow by Pierre Simon, 15 to 18,000 there. The Salcher and Sons certificate. French silver mounted cello bow by Louis Henri Guillet. Another French bow, Mars Auguste Husson. German bow by Frechner there. English cello bow by Arthur Scarborough for W. Hills and Sons, 1500 to 2000. That could be quite a good value. Silver mounted cello bow by John Norwood Lee. German silver mounted cello bow by August Edwin Prager. Another French bow by Alfred Lamy Pair there, 8 to 12. So I expect we're going to see some cellos soon. French bow by Marie-Louise Piano. English silver mounted cello bow by Sidney Yeoman for W.E. Hills and Sons, 2.5 to 4 there. An English silver mounted cello bow by Louis Panormo, 2 to 3. Always interesting, these Panormo bows are quite curious. Interesting head and interesting kind of pearl on the frog. Silver mounted cello bow, possibly by Louis Morazan. Gold mounted cello bow attributed to and probably by Nikolai Kittel. Interesting, 30 to 40,000. The bow is mounted with a replica frog but sold with the original. Interesting. Stick and frog, very good. Yeah, that's kind of curious here. It says attributed to, but by who it doesn't actually say, and nor is there an old certificate, so that's curious to who's saying that. English silver mounted cello bow by Arthur Bultitude. Another English silver mounted cello bow by Edgar Bishop for W.E. Hills and Sons. French cello bow, work of Pierre Simon, quite a simple one. German gold mounted by Frechner. French silver mounted double bass bow by Pierre Husson for Withers and Sons. Silver mounted bass bow by Roger Lott there. And we're on to cellos. A fine English cello by John Betts, London, circa 1790, 50 to 70,000. The English cellos, very popular these days. They go for pretty high prices. An Italian cello by Gaetano Garda, Milan, circa 1925. 45 to 65,000 on that. Labelled Stefano Scarampella. Sold a certificate of Eric Blott there. Lot 151, an Italian cello by Mario Girardi, Milan, 1928. 25 to 35,000 on that. Very fine English cello by William Forster II, London, circa 1790, 50 to 80,000 estimate. These Forster cellos really are shooting up in value. Nice looking instrument. Okay. A German cello, Circle of Jacobus Steiner, circa 1648 to 12,000 there. Labelled Ruggieri. Repairs to table, ribs and back. Sound post crack in table with patch. Sound post crack in back with patch. Interesting kind of lion there. Oh, interesting opportunity to get an older cello there. Peter Ratcliffe Dendro, 1619, 1617. So that's interesting. Here's a closer look. Interesting lion. Looks like that lion head is grafted on to the top of that scroll. So that's a bit curious. Not my favourite lion head that I've ever seen, to be honest. But interesting, 8 to 12 on that. German cello by Neuner and Hornstein and Mitterwald, 1881. 5 to 8. An important Italian cello by Andrea Guarneri, Cremona, 1676, 200 to 300,000. Later scroll, 3 ribs are later. Interesting. I mean, it's certainly not every day that you see an Andrea Guarneri cello up for auction, so Definitely interesting. I think it's had lots of woodworm intrusion there. Seeing certificate from Etienne Vatelot, Paris, 1968. Interesting. An Italian cello by Giulio Degani, Venice, circa 1910. Okay. Cello was originally purchased by the owner's grandfather, Alberto Vianello, directly from the Venetian luthier Giulio Degani. Okay, interesting. We do like a good bit of history. An Italian cello by Camillo Mandelli de Calco in Calco 1922, 12 to 18,000 on that cool scroll. Interesting looking instrument. An English cello by a member of the Ferber family, London, circa 1825 to 7. There you go, Ferber family instrument. A lot lower estimate than some of the other English stuff, but I think it's quite a nice looking instrument. A little bit plain, but could well sound pretty good. Sun post patch and table, pretty common for cello. 3/4 sized Italian cello, probably by Lorenzo Ventapane, Naples, circa 1827. 4 to 6 on that. Interesting though, seeing these kind of high tier 3/4 cellos. We saw the Storioni, I think, in the Ingalls and Hayday auction. English cello by Joseph Hill, London, circa 1770. 18 to 25,000 on that. Cool scroll. I think a lot of these Joseph Hill cellos are going up in value as well. Not as the same as the Forster ones, but they're definitely going up. Cello retains the original fingerboard, neck pegs, end pin and tailpiece. Okay. An Italian cello, circa 1800, 10 to 15,000. Length of back 694, so it seems quite small. I wonder if this has been in the sale before. I seem to remember something like this in one of the Brompton sales. Maybe not. It's a curious looking thing, but I wonder if the size is a bit of a problem potentially. Cello attributed to Alberto Ferdinando Mogli, Rome, 1928. Okay, 6 to 8,000 on that. An English cello by Goulding & Co, London, circa 1800. Another way to get a cheaper English cello there. So a Goulding one. Once again, I think they're can be pretty good, these Goulding cellos. Quite nice. An Italian cello, School of Fiorini, Bologna, circa 1890. 40 to 60,000. We're in a different level again now. Fine English cello by George Panormo, London, circa 1810. A way to get a more expensive English cello. To get a Panormo cello. Unlabelled. Certificate of Peter Bidulph there. 2001. 737 length of back. English scroll, possibly by another hand. Okay. German cello by Joseph Hornstein and Mitterwald, circa 1790. 15 to 20,000 on that. It's got a Hill fingerboard number. Peter Ratcliffe, giving 1773 and 1777. An English cello, School of Foster, London, circa 1790 to 1800. Looks like it needs a bit of TLC. So, could be a nice cello. German cello by Ludwig Fritz Heberlein, Marknekerken, 1928. 5 to 8,000 on that. An important and rare Italian cello by Spirito Sorsano, Cuneo, circa 1725. I mean, I think Sorsano instruments are pretty rare in general, but a cello must be super rare, 200 to 300,000. So interesting. That scroll definitely reminds me of some of the Sorsano violin scrolls. Very interesting. Dender Report, Peter Ratcliffe, 1710. Certificate of Beers, the Real Beers in Kent, 2023. Interesting cello that. Be curious to see if that actually, let's see, does that up for... Oh yeah, someone's bid on that. I mean, that is a pretty rare instrument as far as I'm aware. Fine Austrian guitar by Nicholas George Ries, Vienna, 1832. 6 to 8 the estimate there. So we're into something that's not Italian and not a violin. Nice looking guitar there. Beautiful tuning mechanisms there. So that's interesting. An Italian guitar by Raphael and Antonio Galliano, Naples, circa 1830. 3 to 4,000 on that. This has been in their auction a few times. Nice looking kind of violin. So not violin, nice looking guitar. But not super fancy, and not really the money in the guitars as there are with the violins. So I think it's probably why people are not bidding on it, and it looks like it needs a bit of TLC. This, on the other hand, is a very nice instrument, an Italian guitar by Gennaro Fabbricatore, Naples, circa 1820. One of the best makers of romantic guitars. 6 to 8,000 on that. So looks like it probably needs a little bit of attention there. Nice back on it though. Some historic worm ingress. So it needs a bit of work, but it's not too bad. But I think this estimate is actually not bad. These kind of decorations that are glued on top of the soundboard there. Interesting instrument. So I think that's probably is worth the lower estimate. But I think this auction is more geared towards violin players. An Italian guitar by Gaetano Guadagnini, Turin, 1835. 2 to 3,000 the estimate there. These are interesting kind of guitars, but once again not really worth much compared to violins, and this one is in a pretty bad condition. I think it's also sold with another one that they're saying is Guadagnini family. Certainly looks extremely similar. They're very distinctive, these Guadagnini guitars, but they're not the greatest of quality, I must be honest. Back to bows again. French bow there, Charles Picat, 12 to 18,000 there, stamp VO. Got a Salcho's and Son certificate there. Nickel mounted violin bow attributed to Charles Picat. Silver mounted violin bow attributed to Charles Picat there. Emile Francois Houchard bow there. French bow by Charles Louis Bazar. German silver mounted violin bow by H.R. Frechner. English silver mounted violin bow by James Tubbs there. Silver mounted violin bow by Pierre Husson for Withers and Sons. Not sure why the images change sometimes. Raffen certificate. German silver mounted violin bow by August Moritz Knopf there, 4 to 6. English silver mounted violin bow by James Tubbs, 4 to 6. French violin bow by Gilles Duhot for Didier, 3 to 5. Gold and tortoiseshell mounted violin bow, School of Knopf. French bow by Nicolas Mayer there. Silver mounted violin bow attributed to Eugene Sartre. So if it was by Sartre, it would be, could add 10,000 or so to that estimate, I would say. English silver mounted violin bow by W. Hill and Sons. Hart and Sons bow there. French nickel mounted bow by Prosper Colas. English bow there by Brian Alvey. French bow by Marcel Lapierre. French bow by Eugene Sartre. There we go, 12 to 18,000. So there we go. That's the kind of current price for these. Very good throughout, aside from some minor damage to end of button. Okay, interesting. French bow there by Claude Thomasin. French silver mounted violin bow by Eric Fournier. French bow by Joseph René Lafleur. German bow by Albert Nürnberger. Another English bow by James Tubbs. Always see lots of James Tubbs bows. Fine English gold and tortoiseshell violin bow by William R. Retford for W.E. Hills and Sons, 4 to 6. One of the really good makers there. Nice, beautiful looking bow actually. Unfortunate about the tortoiseshell, but there we go. Silver mounted violin bow by Claude Thomasin. German gold mounted violin bow by Arnold Voigt there. French bow Charles Nicolas Bazar. Silver mounted violin bow by made for Jean Wero. German bow by August Edwin Prager, another good German maker. A fine French silver mounted violin bow by Dominique Picat, Paris, circa 1850. Wow, 70 to 100,000 on this. That is pretty high, isn't it? Sold a certificate for Etienne Vatelot. Addressed to Paul Charles, interesting. Stick, handle and button very good. Frog good aside from minor wear. One small repair crack near underslide even. Interesting bow. Very curious. Well, 70 to 100,000, that's quite a lot for a bow. Right, back to instruments. An Italian violin by Gennaro Vernaccia, Naples, circa 1780. Quite interesting that, because there is the one on Ingalls and Heyday up for sale by Gennaro Vernaccia, which was sold by Amati. So it's curious because you don't really see these that often. Certificate Florian Leonhard 2023. Interesting. 355 length of back. It's got a dendro report there. Everything seems to have a dendro report these days. French violin by Nicholas Viaume there. 8 to 10. An Italian violin, possibly School of Parma, circa 1850, 7 to 10 on this. Gindin certificate on this. Oh, quite nice back. Interesting strip down the middle there. So it's got its some problems. Italian violin by Armando at Altavilla, Naples, 1914. 4 to 6 on that. French violin by Georges Aparu, Miracle, 1931. 3 to 5. An Italian violin by Antonio Lecce, Cremona, 1923, 1500 to 2000. An Italian violin by Vincenzo Postiglione, Naples, 1875, 25 to 40,000 on that. 358 length of back. Another Dimitri Gindin certificate there. Interesting F-holes. Violin attributed to Niccolo Galliano, Naples, 1727. Cool looking violin, 15 to 20,000 on that. Edward Withers certificate there. 355 length of back. An Italian violin by Erminio Malaguti, Milan, 1986, 12 to 18 on that. A violin attributed to Riccardo Genovese, Lecco, 1928, 6 to 8 on that. An English Baroque violin by George Stepani, Manchester, 1981. Needs a bit of setting up there, 3 to 5 on that. Curious to see if that sells or not. French violin attributed to Jean-Baptiste Lamarquis, Miracle, 3 to 5. Not super exciting. Do feel a lot of these prices are a bit high. An Italian violin by David Tekla, Rome, 1694, 50 to 70,000 on that. Etienne Vatlot certificate there. 353 length of back. I mean, there's a lot of fairly high tier stuff in this auction. Just be curious to see how much of it sells. Dutch violin by Pieter Rombots, Amsterdam, circa 1720, 40 to 60,000 on that. That's got a nice varnish on that. 356 length of back. Italian violin by Plinio Michetti, Savona, 1924, 361. That's fairly long. Violin by Paul Bailly, London, 1890, 5 to 7. An English violin by George Crask, London, circa 1840, 3 to 5,000 on that. I do like these Crask violins. This one looks fairly typical, pretty plain. Nothing too crazy on this one. A violin, probably English, circa 1790. Cool scroll, kind of weird outline. 355 length of back. 2 to 3. Could be an interesting one. Property of a retired musician, a fine Italian violin by Pietro Giovanni Mantegazza, Milan, circa 1760, 80 to 120,000 on that. So we're into serious territory again. Another Peter Bidulph certificate. As you can see, the same names appear over and over again. It's a small industry. French violin by Francois Cossard, Neufchâteau, circa 1850, 4 to 6. That's not too bad a price really. That's quite a nice violin. I think the Carlsen stuff is pretty good, so I think that's not too bad. Italian violin by Enzo Miucci, or Mucci, interesting. Como, 1946, 354 length of back, 3 to 5. An Italian violin, circa 1820. Okay, 2 to 3,000 on that. 361 length of back. An Italian violin by Lorenzo and Tommaso Carcassi, Florence, circa 1750. Cool scroll on that. 20 to 30,000. French violin by Claude Pirot, Paris, circa 1820. An English violin by Joseph Anthony Chanot, London, 1892, after Duifo-Pruger, 5 to 8,000. That's a pretty weird looking instrument. Pretty strange. 355. Yeah, that is a bit horrible, to be quite honest. That's pretty weird. French violin by Émile Laurent, after Guadagnini, 4.5 to 6,500. An Austrian violin by Johann Stubiger, Vienna, 1933. An Italian violin by Giuseppe Stefanini, Milan, 1954. See, this violin was made in the Bizet workshop by Giuseppe Stefanini, who signed and dated his work in 1954. Interesting. An Italian violin by Giuseppe Lecce, Genoa, 1934. Quite like those F holes there. 354. An Italian violin attributed to and possibly by G.B. Guadagnini, circa 1740 to 50. 15 to 20,000. Interesting. Well, it would be a lot cheaper than an actual Guadagnini. Interesting. Later back ribs and later 18th century scroll, possibly Venetian. So it's another composite violin, a mixture of everything. 356. It's a Dendro report from Peter Ratcliffe. It's a current bid 14,000. Very speculative, random composite lot. An Italian violin by Paolo Morara, Bologna, 1927. It would be good if they were a bit more open about these instruments being composites in the title. It's a little bit sketchy, you have to read through it there. A violin, possibly Naples, circa 1900. That's quite an interesting looking violin, actually. Quite nice wood and kind of varnish. It's quite curious. 4 to 6 on that. I quite like that. Labelled Joseph Guarnerius, 355. That's an interesting looking violin, actually. Quite like that. That's got charm. An English violin by J. Hodges, 1785. I do like to see some of these older English violins. Fairly interesting. An Italian violin by Lorenzo Ventopane, Naples, circa 1820. 50 to 70,000 on that. Violin is in a fine state of preservation. Yeah, nice back. Sold with a certificate of Chardon from 1958. 350 on that, so it's a little bit smaller. Property of the late Kathleen O'Carroll, a violin attributed to Annibale Fagnola, Turin, circa 1890. 25 to 30,000 on that. Certificate of Hill and Sons there. An interesting violin, circa 1900, after Landolfi. 7 to 10,000 on that. Wow, brilliant back on that. That's really cool. That's really bizarre choice of wood there for a back. Almost might be a good image for the thumbnail. Interesting violin, 350. English violin by William Forster II, London, circa 1790. 4 to 6. Well, you can definitely get a Forster violin a lot cheaper than you can a cello, that's for sure. interesting looking violin, 356. That's the kind of thing that I would potentially look at if I had the money. English violin by the Viola brothers, London, circa 1900, after Guadagnini, 30 to, is it 40,000 on that? Yep. Certificate of John Dilworth. Another interesting violin. A French violin by Claude Piret, Paris, circa 1720. Good early French violin. 15 to 20,000, 362, still pretty big. An Italian violin by Enrico Marchetti, Turin, 1909. 40 to 50,000 on that. Interesting outline and F-hole placement. A French violin by Jean-Francois Uldrich, Paris, circa 1820. Weird, they've taken this picture probably late before the auction started. It's a weird angle. 359 length of back. It's curious. French violin, circa 1820. On label there. An Italian violin by David Tekla, Rome, circa 1710. Okay, looking for 60 to 100,000 on that, so another Tekla. Sold with the Wurlitzer certificate there. I think we must be getting closer to the end of this auction. A violin by Vincenzo Panormo, London or Dublin, circa 1790. 30 to 40, all reserve already met there, so that's interesting. Certificate of John Dilworth, 355, length of back. A French violin by Jean Gosselin, Paris, 1817. 12 to 16,000. 360, length of back. An American violin by George Gamunda II, Astoria, 1906. 6 to 8,000, one of the good older American makers there. 356 length of back. An Italian violin, School of Sannino, Naples, circa 1920. 5 to 8,000 on that. Kind of interesting back on that. A violin made for G. Fays Anvers, circa 1860. Okay, 355 on that. A French violin by JTL, circa 1880, so it's a bit different to some of the Italian stuff there, 2 to 4 on that. An Italian violin by Antonio Pedrinelli, Crespano, 1827, 30 to 40,000 on that, 360 length back. Interesting scroll, slightly odd outline and F-hole placement, a little bit weird. And an English violin by Richard Duke, London, circa 1770, 7 to 10,000 on that. It's not super fancy, but interesting maker. French violin by Nicolas Augustin Chapuis, Paris, circa 1787, 5 to 7. One of my favourite French makers there. Interesting stuff. This is one not super interesting. 362 length of back there. Soundpost cracking table, etc. The ex Victor Danchenko, an Italian violin by Gaetano Guadagnini II, Turin, 1830. 100 to 150,000. Interesting looking violin. 359 length of back. Cool varnish. Interesting scroll there. A nice looking violin. Certificate of and letter of William Monig. Very curious. 359 length of back. Let's see what else we got there. The moaning record of this violin can be traced back as far as 1943 when they purchased it from Vincent Cardillo, a well-known collector and dealer. Okay, interesting. That's quite curious. Let's see what else we got here. A fine Italian violin by Giuseppe Scarampella, Florence, 1897, 120 to 160,000. violin is a fine state of preservation. Interesting, let's have a look at this. Violin features in Stefano Scarampella by Eric Blott, 2002. Interesting kind of colour to the varnish there. Very curious. Not a super exciting instrument, but Scarampella, very popular. 120 to 160,000. Be interesting to see if it goes for that. Then, let's see, looks like we missed one, did we? No, we didn't. The X Max Strub X John Barson, an important Italian violin by Giovanni Grancino, Milan, circa 1690, 120 to 160,000. Top tier Milanese violin here. Really nice looking instrument, actually. This is very nice. Very fine state of preservation. Yeah, looks pretty good. Sold with certificate of Emil Hermann, 1956. Interesting that they're not trying to sell these instruments with newer certificates. That's a little bit strange. 354 length of back on that. Then I think this is the last one. Lot 270, property of a retired musician, Italian violin by Niccolo Galliano, Naples, circa 1760, 150 to 180,000. Really cool scroll on that. Very interesting. Fairly plain looking on the back. And on the scroll, certificate of Peter Binolf, 2023, 356 length of back, Dendro report as well. Well, there you go, you have it. There's the Bromptons. That was a little bit of a slog, and maybe I shouldn't have really gone through everything quite like that. That was probably getting a bit much. Well, what can I say? Loads of Italian instruments, loads of French bows, kind of interesting stuff, but there's almost so much of it that it gets a little bit hard to digest, really. I'd like to have seen a bit more kind of variation, to be honest. The sea of Italian stuff gets a little bit much at times, but anyway, very interesting auction. So I'll put a link in the description. As always, please comment if you have any thoughts or suggestions, and sorry that it was a bit lengthy, this video. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching, appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao.